dreary night of November. Welcome, Franken readers, to Sundays with Frankenstein. Wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life. Wandering spirits, this is episode 6 of Sundays with Frankenstein. We'll be covering volume 2, chapters 1 and 2 of the 1818 edition today. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach in Philadelphia. And joining me today is actor and collector Dan Hodge. Dan, hello.
Hey, how are you, Ed?
I am great. You have a new background today for us?
I do. You might actually be able to see me this week.
Yeah, we had so much light coming in last time. So
Yeah, well.
This one will be just fine, I'm sure. And look at that. I have a new glass with Sundays with Frankenstein on it. And it's on the front and it's on the back. Sundays with Frankenstein.
Ed, where could I get one of those?
I will tell you in just a moment, because there's more. Because there's also this awesome t-shirt that I had to spread my beard for you to see. So there you go. So we have these great t-shirts available as well. And somebody said they couldn't imagine me in a t-shirt with the way I usually dress. But hey, as long as I can put a vest over it, I'm fine. So, but I did go full jacket today too. So I've tweeted out, and now I got to fix the beard. But you can get these things. We've set up a website for merchandise, which I will share with you all right now. The link is in the chat. It's also you can find the link at our website too. But here it is. Support the Rosenbach and Sundays with Frankenstein. We have t-shirts, we have glasses, we have stickers. Some of the t-shirt sizes have already sold out. And as the show goes on, I think all of them are going to sell out. So when that happens, you can hit pre-order for some of the sizes. I think when you click on this one, the larger sizes are still available. But this one, I think, is for the smaller sizes. You can already pre-order them. We're going to order more right away. The glasses as well, which I'm really excited to have and be able to drink out of every week. And I love the artwork. This is the artwork for the show that looks really good. So, although your hair is much shorter in the cartoon rendering of you, Dan.
Well, you know, that headshot's a
there you are. Your hair is much shorter in that. And me, I have a lot more hair. My cartoon version is a lot less bald than I am in life. So, and I did not request that. I even told him, I said, hey, I don't have to be, you can make me more bald than I am, but he didn't. So there we go. Oh, here I am. There we go. So awesome. So you guys can order shirts, you can order glasses, you can order stickers. I am very excited that we have this stuff available, excuse me, for you to get. We have, had lots of requests for merchandise, and we're finally getting that done. So, but Dan, you and I also have a program coming up, just the two of us, on Wednesday, don't we?
We do indeed. I'm very excited about it.
And it is called Franken Films, and we're going to look at the movie versions of Frankenstein and go through a kind of a little history of them and talk about our favorites. And what else are we going to see, Dan?
What else are we going to see?
Not specifically, but we're also going to see.
Some bits and pieces from my collection. Things that I have and things that I've picked up over the years. I started writing letters to actors, and probably when I was in middle school. If not younger, and then buying posters and such back when you had to buy a paper and read through to find out what was for sale.
Well, we'll look at some images of some of the things that you have in your collection. That'll be really nice to see. And it's called Franken Films, and it only for Rosenbach members. It is free for Rosenbach members. You can go to our website and you can register for it. but you have to be a member to join. And for those of you from our last run of the Sundays with Dracula show, if you're in the Dracula Club, yes, you are a Rosenbach member. That made you a member of the Rosenbach. So so come and watch us. We've already got, you know, a whole bunch of people registered, and I'm sure it will grow even more. So a reminder to everybody watching on Zoom right now, set your chat setting to all panelists and all attendees, so everyone can hear, everyone can read what you are saying. Dan, did I see you drinking something out of your beaker tonight?
I did. Yes, I've got a lovely glass of wine. The bottle's sitting right here, an organic wine, which I'm kind of interested to try. It's lovely.
And you know exactly how many milliliters you're drinking, right? So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll drink. How many is this?
Yeah, I just track by the glass full. Well, I am drinking today this lovely Mshika's Garden Thai chili gin from I love the picture of the chilies in it. From Tamworth Distilling. This Thai chili gin is made with juniper, Thai chilies, and macaroot lime leaf for a fresh and exotic punch. And we have come up with a drink for it that we advertised week is called the Fallen Angel. I changed the name of the drink because then after I like really had it and I was testing it because I like to test. That's why the bottle's all the way down. I decided this drink is now called the Wandering Spirit. And it is the Thai chili gin, some fresh squeezed lime juice. I just squeezed a lime, about half a lime I squeezed into it, and an ounce of simple syrup. If you just have regular sugar, just stir and stir and stir and stir and stir until you can dissolve most of it. But I use simple syrup instead. And then a little splash of soda water at the end, a little splash of seltzer in it. So it is absolutely delicious. It's like a great variation on a gin and tonic or a gimlet. Really refreshing. And I didn't think Fallen Angel fit it, so I had to change it to the Wandering Spirit. So absolutely delicious. I pre-made a second one so I can have that very quickly because I can't be squeezing limes on the show later. So so we are all set. Thanks to Brianna, our chat Igor, who is putting the recipe in our chat right now. We also have the recipe on our website when we post the video for this show. So thanks to Art and the Age for coming up with this very yummy concoction. You can buy a bottle at Art and the Age in Philadelphia. But we're not just drinking here today, Dan. We are also talking about Frankenstein. And that's what we do every week. We dissect, anatomize, dismember, and bring back to life this book by Mary Shelley, chapter by chapter, page by page, word by word, as we create our very own conversational annotation of the entire novel. And in doing this, we at the Rosenbach asked you to support us, which you can do by donation. And if you are not already a member, please join the Rosenbach. The basic Rosenbach membership level is even called the Mary Shelley level. So I'll have a little more to say about this at the mid-break. And just a last reminder before we start, the chat, if you're watching live on Zoom, that's for you to talk to each other. You can do that. If you have a question for Dan or I, put it in the Q&A. There's already a couple questions in there, and we will do our best to hit as many as possible. Kristen already asked, which movies will you be discussing? I'd like to rewatch and refresh my memory before Wednesday. Dan, we already talked about this. I would encourage everybody to go online and find the Thomas Edison Frankenstein. It's very short. What's it, like 10 minutes long or something?
Yeah, if that. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. We'll definitely be talking about that. And we'll talk about Universal Frankenstein. You'll talk about Hammer, obviously. And then we'll hit a few others. We'll definitely talk about Branagh's Frankenstein. And then there will just be some others in between that we'll hit. Our favorites, and kind of give you a nice scope of what happens between kind of Hammer and Branagh, and then maybe what's going on a little bit today. So I'm sorry that's not like a lot of exact titles, but you know, feel free to watch something, and then if we're not talking about it, you can hit us up with a question during the program, and we're happy to talk about it. So
if you just hit the Hammers and the Universals between now and Wednesday, that's a full that's a full plate of
Yeah.
pictures to watch, and I think it's the core of what Frankenstein in cinema is about.
Dan, Bruce asks if you have you ever played Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster, in your professional career, and if you haven't, would you like to be the creature or Victor in a
I mean,
show?
I would adore an opportunity to play the creature, because it's kind of what gave me the springboard into my career in general. But funnily enough, I did play Victor Frankenstein. It was early in my career in Philadelphia, to play by a guy named Neil Bell. It's called Monster. And for the now defunct Luna Theater Group. And I played Victor Frankenstein, and wonderful actor John Lopes played the creature. And it's
John's
the show.
a great actor. I really like John.
He and I got to be very good friends working on that show. And he's also a big Frankenstein, like film buff. So we would sit around on breaks and talk about it. And of course, the late, gorgeous, wonderful actress, Melissa Lynch, people that I got to be very close with on that show. That's the show we all met on.
I wish I was aware of that show when it happened. So,
Wow.
All right. Well, that's great. All right. Let's get to the book. And I wanted to back up a little bit and to hit the end of the last chapter from volume 1, because there were some changes in the 1831 edition that I just mentioned briefly at the end of last show, because I didn't want to go on for another hour. But we'll hit them briefly, and I promise it'll be briefly at the start here, because the last chapter ends, "Amiable cousin, such were your thoughts, mild and gentle as your own dear eyes and voice. But I was a wretch, and none ever conceived of the misery that I then endured." Very much in Victor's, woe is me stage. But in the 1831, there's a whole 3 paragraphs added, and replacing this one here. And let me just show. I'll do a couple shares here. This share is from a website that has the text, and I'm just going to show this briefly because it's too small to read. But you can see this is the 1818 edition here, and this paragraph is the same for the end, but then these are taken out, including what I just read, and all of this is added. And let me add what he put in there, or she put in there, and that would be here. And this is the text that she has added. And I just want to highlight a couple things in this, because it's a substantial change, especially for the end of a volume, even though those volume endings are not there anymore in the 1831 edition either. But first we get this: "On the morrow Justine died," and a bit of this, everybody's all upset about it, and then "she perished on the scaffold as a murderess." I mean, we actually get the end of Justine. She brings it into the novel to on the scaffold. So which is kind of missing from the end of the other one. It's almost like everybody knows she's going to die, but we don't get that final, this is happening. And then it's this, and then he gets into the whole, here's the kind of woe is me, but he's also mentioning others. "I turned to contemplate the deep and voiceless grief of my Elizabeth." Whoa, Victor's turning to someone else and seeing what's going on with them. "And my father's woe," he even has here, "and my father's woe." And the desolation of the late smiling home. And then he has down here, and then he turns into Victor again. "Ye weep, unhappy ones, but these are not your last. These are not your last tears. Again shall you raise the funeral wail, and the sound of your lamentations shall again and again be heard." I mean, you can hear that biblical, intonation, right, Dan?
Oh gosh, yes.
The lamentations. But at the end of that, towards the end of that, it's the "if thus inexorable fate be satisfied." That fate is inexorable. And this is the whole point of these, revisions, is that she's really emphasizing the fate that nobody Victor included, Victor especially, doesn't make a choice in this novel, that this is the inexorable fate. And again, that's why it almost, and I think that biblical language, ties up with it, that kind of Old Testament biblical God who is, like no matter what you do, it was always his plan. And if you're not doing it the right way, you're going to suffer for it anyway. That's what we get here. And then at the very end of this, it is, thus spoke my prophetic soul, as torn by remorse, horror, and despair, I beheld those I loved spend vain sorrow upon the graves of William and Justine, the first hapless victims to my unhallowed arts. So it's all going to continue to happen. Victor is not just desolated by what has occurred so far. He is just prophesying that this is going to continue. And I think that's I think it's almost not where this character should be or is right now. Like, he's upset, but this whole prophesying the future that all these people are going to die is a little surprising for me from him. What do you think, Dan?
I think so. I think it functions in some ways better as a cliffhanger if this was a 3-volume novel. You know what I mean? And the fact that I think you said in the by 31 it was a single volume. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm very certain the 1831 are not broken into volumes. That it is. I know it's a 1-volume edition. So,
but I think that does make it interesting, because you sent me this, for my own study, and I think it as a cliffhanger, it's magnificent. Like, if you're reading this and like waiting for the 2nd volume to come available, holy cats! Like, what a marvelous place to stand. And also, I love the. I don't know that the term unhallowed arts has been used heretofore in the book.
Yeah.
So there's that the thing that we talked about early on in this process, the kind of moral shift that surrounded the way that Mary perhaps was looking for the work to be perceived.
Mm-hmm.
That it was much more, I think, ambiguous in the earlier draft, in the earlier publication. And then as it moves forward, as you said, leaning into the fate and leaning into things being unhallowed and moral certainties. I think it's a really, really fascinating shift in that regard.
I love that, victims to my unhallowed arts as well. So
yeah.
Excellent. So I just wanted to make sure that we hit that, because I felt like that wasn't. I think it's a little important, and we should have. I wanted to go a little more in depth into these changes that are made, as I always do. And sometimes in the beginning when we did this, I figure we're always going to get the I'll always get to all the changes made in 1831, and I actually can't. There's actually too many. So it'd be like we could do a show on just the changes in the 1831 edition.
Don't tease them. Don't tease them.
All righty. Well, let's get to the next then. So now we're in volume 2, and here we are at the chapter 1 in volume 2. Nothing is more painful to the human mind. And then, did you have a copy there?
Yeah.
Can you go from sleep fled my eyes on down to the end of that paragraph?
Let's see.
It's in the first paragraph, halfway through the first paragraph.
There it goes. Sleep fled from my eyes. I wandered like an evil spirit, for I had committed deeds of mischief beyond description, horrible, and more, much more, I persuaded myself was yet behind. Yet my heart overflowed with kindness and the love of virtue. I had begun life with benevolent intentions and thirsted for the moment when I could put them in practice and make myself useful to my fellow beings. Now all was blasted. Instead of that sincerity of conscience which had allowed me to look back upon the past with self-satisfaction, and from thence to gather promise of new hopes, I was seized by remorse and the sense of guilt which hurried me away from a hell of intense tortures such as no language can describe.
You have sincerity of conscience. I have serenity. I'm just wondering, is that a?
Let me take a look. I have sincerity of conscience.
I have serenity in my copy here, and I I have to check other editions now. Is it sincerity or serenity? Where did my serenity come from? That's interesting. But in any case, the if you just read that out loud to somebody, who says that? The creature or Victor?
Well, and the blending of the two, the way their languages kind of ride against each other is where this part of the book really starts to become fascinating, because they both, Victor views both the creature and himself as wretched, and begins to, especially once people start dying, the body starts stacking up. And the creature kind of lives in that, and this struggle for the good of intention versus the desolation of being that both of them navigate their ways through is really, I mean, this part of the book is the way it sets up Victor and the creature as parallels. I adore. Like,
I'm going to ask people, somebody has, I have Serenity 1818. So I wonder, and yours is, you have an 1818 edition.
I do. Yeah. I've got an 1818.
Is that the Nick Groom edited by, or Marilyn Butler? Because I think you have an Oxford.
Marilyn Butler.
Yeah. Huh. I wonder where this change occurs. Well, it's Serenity and Klinger, somebody says. This is something I'm going to have to post about and see what the difference is between this reading of Sincerity or Serenity.
I mean, as someone who reads a lot of Shakespeare, it's something that editors of Shakespeare do all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You can copyright an edition.
Yeah.
You change a word here and a word there.
I wonder where Marilyn Butler comes up with that reading, and maybe she's taking a reading off of the manuscript and thinking that that's either the more correct or what. So I'll have to investigate that and post about it. But yeah, and also if I said who says I wandered like an evil spirit in this novel? I mean, everybody's gonna say the creature, and it's Victor, right. And it's the yet my heart overflowed with kindness and the love of virtue. And it's like, the creature will say that, like, he wants to be good. And I have begun life with benevolent intentions. That's like, there's no way I'm getting it right. If, if like, well, now I will, but like, if I had just had those quotes out of context, I would have guessed the creature for almost all of them. So seized by remorse in the sense of guilt, hell of intense tortures. And you're right. Now, this is the beginning of where we get this blending, and it's not only in language, but it's in how they actually behave as well, as we'll see, especially as these two chapters go along. He decides that, again, it's more creature language here. I shunned the face of man. All sound of joy or complacency was torture to me. Solitude was my only consolation. Deep, dark, death-like solitude. Victor's like choosing solitude, and he thinks that that's a revelation here. I mean, this is what he's been doing all along. This is what he did in Ingolstadt. This is what, he pulled himself away from people and locked himself up, and that leads to, his downfall. If this was, 50 years ago, we were talking about the tragic flaw of Victor. That's his tragic flaw. So it's not going to be a consolation for him, nor a constellation. It is, but he's off on his own now. He's going to be, in excessive sorrow. Oh, his father says to him, though, that excessive sorrow prevents. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, it counterpoints what you're getting into. So lead the charge.
Yeah, his father says excessive sorrow prevents improvement or enjoyment, or even the discharge of daily usefulness, without which no man is fit for society. And Victor's response is what? This advice, although good, was totally inapplicable to my case. Totally, Dad. That's not what's going on with me. And it is. And Victor, listen to your dad. But he doesn't. And he will just continue to grieve.
And it's funny because as I read this, of course, coming from my background, it's exactly, almost even structurally, the exact same advice Claudius gives to Hamlet in the first scene. Well, not in the first scene, because the battlements are the first scene, but when you're in the court and Hamlet comes in and, a little more than kin and less than kind, and Claudius comes to him and talks about the death of fathers and talks about, to persever in in condolement is, impious stubbornness, and talks about how, like, do not forever with, the mother says, Gertrude says, do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. And this notion that, like, too much grief is actually an insult to the people who have died. And it's reading this, I just kept coming back to that, like, and Victor and Hamlet have the same response. They're like, get away from me. You don't know how I feel.
Well, we can trust, Gertrude in Hamlet on there.
You can.
Claudius has got another motive. Claudius doesn't want him to,
well,
he has a motive for telling him not to grieve. So.
He's got a stake in the game, shall we say.
Yeah. So, awesome. But the whole family, he says, then we retired to our house at Bellerive. And this is something I actually didn't mention what the last time Bellerive came up, is that the Frankenstein family, they have two houses. They have a house within Geneva. That's like their home. And that's where Victor goes to, and he can't get there because the gates are closed at night because he gets there too late. And they also have a house in Bellerive. And I'll mention what Bellerive is in a sec because, for this novel. In chapter 1, when Victor talks about when he sees that lightning strike the tree, that's when the family is staying at their house in Bellerive. Bellerive is outside of Geneva, or they have another house outside of the gate, so in the suburbs. And the Villa Diodati, which you talked about last episode, or the episode before, I can't remember, was originally called the Villa Bellerive, Bellerive, Villa Bellerive, but that means like beautiful site or shoreline or something like that, because it's on the edge of the lake. But it was because and that area outside Geneva, right there, was called Bellerive. So this was the Villa Bellerive, and Byron is the one that started calling the house the Villa Diodati because he liked the Diodati family connection, because he thought it meant Milton had been there. So it's actually Byron that was started to refer to the house as Villa Diodati. Before that, it was Villa Bellerive, and it was just named after that area. People were calling that area Bellerive. That was like the suburb. Like I'm in Jenkintown in Philadelphia. It was like Bellerive was like a suburb of Geneva. And the cottage that the Shelleys were staying in, the Maison Chapuis, was also in Bellerive. That's where they were staying, in that Bellerive area. So Mary, by saying they have a house in Bellerive, and she spells it differently too, by saying they have a house in Bellerive, she's kind of situating the Frankenstein house in the area where not only did she come up with the idea for that, but she was staying, and where the Villa Diodati, I mean, the Villa Diodati in her mind could have been where the Frankenstein Bellerive house is. Or maybe it's the Maison Chapuis, which I don't think stands anymore. I think that one's not there anymore. So it's just a little thing I should have noted earlier on in the novel, that she's specifically placing her characters, not just in Geneva, like in general, but like also in a place where she was in writing this novel. And I really like that little bit about it. So, and then Victor goes off on a boat. He likes his little boating. He says, often after the family had retired for the night, I took the boat and passed many hours upon the water. Sometimes with my sails set, I was carried by the wind, and sometimes after rowing into the middle of the lake, I left the boat to pursue its own course. This is something that the Shelleys used to like to do, and Byron used to like to do. He used to like to go out on the boat at night, and there's even a moment and I also, what's interesting about the way he describes that is that he just likes it carried by the wind, like the boat pursues its own course, as if like it's being at the mercy of nature. It's being at the mercy of what, like, I'll just let the current take me along, which Victor finds consoling here. And that's interesting because he keeps trying to find, this is something that I think we get some resolution for in this chapter. Like Victor's seeking some kind of resolution from nature and not getting it. Like here he thinks he is getting it just in this boat and letting the natural waters and the wind take him where he will, but it doesn't in the end satisfy him.
I mean, this is Victor's nature to a T, where he sets himself on a course, he pursues it to a certain point, and then abandons it. Not to put too fine a point on it, but he leans back and says, "Well, it's up to the fates now. It's too hard a knot for me to untie."
Well, we have a little biographical hint here at this of the Shelleys enjoying the boating. And let me share this here. This is their book. This is the history of a 6 weeks tour through a part of France, Switzerland, Germany, and Holland, with letters descriptive of a sail around the Lake of Geneva and of the glaciers of Chamonix. This was actually published before Frankenstein, also published anonymously, and it in 1817. So it's about 3 months before. It was October. Frankenstein's published 1st of January, and it is basically the travel. I mentioned this before because Mont Blanc is at the end of this, and the Shelley's poem Mont Blanc is published at the end of this. It's basically an account of their honeymoon tour, and not that they were married, but they're running their elopement tour of Europe when they first run away together. What's in this book are they cleaned up versions from their journals, both Mary and Percy, and letters that they had written. And in this, let me go to the page. On page, oops, went too far. Here we go. Page 95. We have, oh, no, I went too far again. Yeah. On page 95, we have this little part here where we have not yet found, blah, blah, blah. We have hired a boat, and every evening at about 6 o'clock, we sail on the lake, which is delightful. Whether we glide over a glassy surface or are speeded along by a strong wind, the waves of this lake never afflict me with that sickness that deprives me of all enjoyment in a sea voyage. On the contrary, the tossing of our boat raises my spirits and inspires me with unusual hilarity, which I think is a funny little thing for her to say. And this is from Mary's journal, and that was then put into the book. So what Victor's doing is something that the Shelleys themselves and Mary herself really enjoyed doing, and herself found enjoyment in it. Victor, though, of course, then is tempted to plunge into the silent lake that the waters might close over me and my calamities forever. But he restrains himself, and basically because he says he doesn't want to leave his family at the mercies of the creature that he has created. So he's protecting them by not committing suicide. But that drowning death is interesting, that Victor imagines that, because as a writer, as Mary Shelley's writing this, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, twice in her life tried to drown herself when she was, grieving over her relationship with I think Fuseli the one time. Maybe both were with Fuseli, or maybe one was over Gilbert Imlay. But actually, her mother tries to drown herself twice and doesn't succeed, thankfully. And then Percy's wife, Harriet, it's hard to know at what stage the writing is here, but she has either just drowned herself when she has, and she knows that when she's writing this passage, or she will soon. I think she has probably already killed herself when Mary comes to write this passage, but I don't know if we can ever know the exact dates of that. And prophetically, Percy himself will drown just 4 years after Frankenstein is published. So it winds up being this moment where Victor's contemplating not just suicide itself, but also drowning himself is something that really affects her, has affected her. Her mother has affected their life, with Percy's wife, and will be the actual fate of Percy. And as we all know, Victor is Percy anyway. So that's a weird thing. Like, like if I were Mary and I'm revising this book, I'd have cut it out. Like that part. Like but you know, that's, I don't know how much she would have been reminded of it herself, but it's got to be in somewhere in her unconscious that this is the way she's choosing for these characters to die. Right?
I mean, I presume.
Yeah.
The unconscious is a slippery thing.
It is. So but Victor's not going to kill himself. Instead, well, he still lives in daily fear lest the monster whom I had created should perpetrate some new wickedness. And he also gnashes his teeth, which I thought, I've, you know, you come across that phrase so much, and not that you would ever, I mean, and that's not a phrase you're ever going to use in real life, right? Like, I gnashed my teeth. You might, because like as an actor, like in coming up with this histrionic state of showing grief, maybe, but that's what it is. And it's very biblical, which I find interesting too. That this is a phrase that is used several times in the Bible, the gnashing of teeth. And at the end of that paragraph where he talks about gnashing his teeth, he also again gets into this, you know, heightened language. I wish to see him again, the creature, that I might wreak the utmost extent of anger on his head and avenge the deaths of William and Justine. That wreak the utmost extent of anger on his head again sounds like a biblical prophet, you know, here. It's also a little silly. I just, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna bait his head in, you know, and I don't. Victor's not a tough guy, is he?
No.
So I you know, I understand the, you know, him wanting to that kind of vengeance, but it just seems so ineffectual to me reading this. So anyway, that's just a little note there. Gnashed my teeth. I just found that so fascinating. And I did look it up, like the whole, like, what does it actually mean? Like it's this, like, gritting your teeth. But I've never seen anybody really do it in this kind of way, in the way that it's often described. Although some cultures have very kind of, you know, established kind of ritual, physical ways of expressing grief, that you know, pulling your hair and things like that. But the gnashing of the teeth, I always found interesting. So anyway, Elizabeth comes in, and she is, she says, and when I reflect, my dear cousin, on the miserable death of Justine, I no longer see the world and its works as they before appeared to me. That's very interesting, isn't it? That Elizabeth has kind of almost had like, the world's different now.
The veil has dropped from her eyes.
Yeah, or she's left paradise in a sense, you know.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Their you know, their whole childhood, as we were described earlier, was very, you know, idyllic. It was in Eden, and now it's not. Now they have been cast from paradise, and it's not that she has done anything wrong, but Victor has. And it's, wow, it's the reverse, right, of the Garden of Eden story. Eve sins, and Adam participates, and then they're cast out. But here it's Adam, Victor, like the
Victor
man,
eats from the tree of knowledge, but
you know,
nobody else participates in it. Interestingly enough,
yeah.
Like they're unwitting victims. You know, the creature. What is it? Oh God, what is that Shakespeare quote? Oh, that the slave, it's Othello. Oh, that the slave had 40,000 lives. One is too poor, too weak for my revenge. Which almost feels like the way the creature navigates this. Like, you know, to kill Victor would be far too simple. Mm-hmm. There's not enough misery in just killing someone.
Yes.
So he carves a path through the family.
Yeah. And then Elizabeth will go on and also say, I looked upon the accounts of vice and injustice that I read in books or heard from others as tales of ancient days, and they were remote, and at least they were remote and more familiar to reason than to the imagination. But now misery has come home, and men appear to me as monsters thirsting for each other's blood. She doesn't know what she's talking about, but she's talking about Victor and the creature. And but also that she's talking about how what she reads in books, and what she reads leads her to think that bad stuff happens to other people elsewhere, and now she's faced with the fact that, oh no, it's actually in my life too. And the creature will go through the same exact thing later when he's especially Plutarch, when he's reading Plutarch, and he talks about how the deeds of these other people in other places, and he compares it to what he sees around him. But I think in his case, which will be very interesting to see, he sees the goodness in the nobility in the de Lacys. But for Elizabeth right now, it's different. So, but the men appear to me as monsters. She's also talks about the depravity of human creatures. I should have thought such a creature unfit to remain in the society of men. These are all very pregnant phrases for, the readers, and knowing what is, or having a strong idea of what is going on so far in this novel. And then she asks this zinger, right? When falsehood can look so like the truth, who can assure themselves of certain happiness? If you're Victor, keeping this secret from everybody here, and he hears that line, that's like a dagger in him, isn't it?
If he has any conscience or spirit.
Yeah.
Or if he pays attention to anybody beyond himself, which I think is the more complicated question.
Yeah. At the end of the day. And he doesn't have to in the 1831 edition. I'll get to the reason why he doesn't have to pay attention to them in a minute. But for now, that when falsehood can look so like the truth, who can assure themselves of certain happiness? I mean, that seems like that's where Elizabeth is at this point. This is what she has gleaned from the fact that evil goes on in the world. She can never be sure now of her happiness. Because as you said, that veil has been lifted. But for Victor, that's a real kind of assault on what's going on with him, that of course you can't, because you're actually the one causing, withholding truth from these people. Victor blames himself, in effect, I was the true murderer. And she says, be calm, my dear Victor. I would sacrifice my life to your peace. Well, big spoiler, people. So it's going to happen. Oh, we just missed a wretch, too, at the end of the paragraph before a wretch. So there you go. Only 7 times in these 2 chapters today we get the word wretch. It is clearly her favorite word for this novel. This novel is about wretchedness. 7 times in these 2 chapters. So 60 some in the book. I mean, for a word like wretch to come up in that many forms, wretch, wretched, wretchedness, wretchedly, that's, that's what you're writing about. So it's not like a simple word. It is a word that you constantly are choosing to describe the creature, and people constantly use it to describe themselves. Victor, the family decides they're going to take an excursion to the valley of the Chamonix. This is the mountain range there. The Mont Blanc is the largest of. And I love this I posted this on our Facebook group, but this map that somebody put together, I will tell you who put it together in just a moment to give them credit. But it is this, I'll just jump up to the top here. Whoops. Home. This was put together by Caitlin Burke, who is a geospatial specialist and English librarian and at the University of Maryland. And she put together this really cool map. And it's it's easier to go from Ingolstadt here, because there's Ingolstadt where he goes to school. And note how far it is from Geneva, which is right here. So this is the distance here. And this, if we go over to Geneva, we can see the locations of where everything is situated. Here's Geneva, and here's Bellerive. It's maybe anywhere from it's like a half hour to an hour away, is here, and this is the Chamonix Mont Blanc Valley here with the sea of ice, the Mer de Glace down here. And I did it on a Google thing, and it said like it's a 4-hour walk. So, you know, that's roughly, they would be walking or taking a car. They take a carriage, you know, through there. So it's not, you know, right next door, but it's a little bit of a journey, but it's not too far. It's something you can do in a few hours to get there. So this is the area that we're talking about here right now. So I thought it's nice to have a map to share that kind of stuff. So you can find that link on our Facebook group to that map. It's really, really well done. And it goes through the entire novel. So everywhere that he goes, and she uses period maps to show where he's traveling all throughout this novel. So here's the interesting part now that happens. He talks about he wishes he was alone. I wish I was alone. And then the family all goes off and travels, you know, in carriage, and they go through the valley, and we get this beautiful description of the countryside, and beheld immense mountains and precipices overhanging us on every side, and the river raging among the rocks. And then they go on this journey upon mules and see the ruined castles hanging on the precipices of piney mountains. And it's all very beautiful description. In the 1831, Mary said, "No, Victor's alone." And she cuts out the entire family, and she literally changes the text. So Victor goes off by himself and sees the countryside. So all the travel description, now it's Victor alone seeing this stuff without anyone. He's already isolated himself, which makes sense because, as we've seen a bit, he then has to at one point leave the family to go off by himself to see the creature. But for the 1831, she decided it was going to be it was going to be sooner. Like this whole little journey to Chamonix should be Victor alone. But that makes more sense for this character. And I think, you know, I agree that it does. He sees Mont Blanc again, as he's already described it on his journey back home. The supreme, magnificent Mont Blanc. I think Percy added that little phrase in there, supreme and magnificent. And read my poem. Actually, he hadn't written it yet. No, he'd already written it. So, and then I often suffered because in our text, I often suffered my mule to lag behind and indulge in the misery of reflection. He doesn't have to do that in the 1831 because he's already alone. But then he takes himself apart. He retires early to his apartment, looking out the window at the pallid lightning that played above Mont Blanc, and listening to the rushing of the Arve which pursued ran below my window. So, and that's the end of the chapter in this. Where am I at in chapter 2? Am I in chapter 2 yet in my notes? I think I am. This is where he decides to go off on himself, right? Yeah. Now he goes off by himself and leaves his family behind. And there's a couple things I wanted to note here. Where is it? And we're making good time. So we're really going to do this today when he meets the creature. I say that now, then it'll all come crashing. But if we have enough time, I'd love to, what we get to the end of this chapter, is that why don't we go back and forth, and I'll read Victor and you read the creature. And we can do that in like about 10 minutes. And then we could talk about it. Would be a good way to end this if we have enough time. So, and we have enough time, so we will. But he says he is going to, here it is. Oh, it's at the end of the first chapter. He says, I often suffered my mule. Oh, it's right there. I often suffered my mule to lag behind and indulged in the misery of reflection. Well, of course he did. That's what he does, indulges in his misery. And I find that that's just, it's not redundant, but it's just, we are so reminded of his misery, or he's constantly reminding us of his own misery. And
it's interesting, like that stretch is why I need to revisit the 1831. But not having him break away from them sooner, I think, is wonderfully revelatory of his character, because we talk a lot about his family and how Elizabeth feels and this stuff and his father, and they all go on a trip together. And after spending so much time away from them, and all he wants to do is be alone, so that even when he's with them, he's either riding ahead or falling behind in an effort to escape these people that he professes to care for, and that he bemoans actively when they're gone, but when they're alive and next to him, he doesn't want to be around them. Like, that to me is, I think, more revelatory of Victor's character than of him just setting off to take the journey on his own.
I'm putting a link for this map. I agree, absolutely. Somebody just asked me to put a link of the map in the chat because it wasn't there. And there's the link that I just put in there. Yes, I absolutely agree. And he's going off here too to not just kind of indulge in his own misery and separate himself, but he is actually looking for some solace here. He's looking for this kind of, what can nature give to me? And he says, I remembered the effect that the view of the tremendous and ever-moving glacier had produced upon my mind when I first saw it. It had then filled me with a sublime ecstasy that gave wings to the soul and allowed it to soar from the obscure world to light and joy. The sight of the awful and majestic in nature had indeed always the effect of solemnizing my mind and causing me to forget the passing cares of life. I determined to go alone, for I was well acquainted with the path, and the presence of another would destroy the solitary grandeur of the scene. I keep talking about sublimity and what that sublime meant for them, and we've talked about this in other episodes, but there's a really good definition in my Norton Critical from the OED and the note. It says, the sublime is affecting the mind with a sense of overwhelming grandeur or irresistible power, calculated to inspire awe, deep reverence, or lofty emotion by reason of its beauty, vastness, or grandeur. So, and this is the effect that he's out for. And what happens then is you're kind of so overwhelmed by the grandeur of nature that after it happens, you kind of experience this, this kind of relief and this solace. And that's what he's trying to achieve here by doing this. But then it doesn't work. And we have this little poem quoted here, and it's from a Shelley poem, the Mutability, and it is, read that, read the excerpt. It's actually the last two stanzas of On Mutability. Why don't you read that, Dan? And then I'm going to go back. Yeah, just read those two, and then we'll go back and actually read what's right before it, because he actually explains. This is what I think. Like, we get the poem explained and then the poem, but read the poem.
We rest. A dream has power to poison sleep. We rise. One wandering thought pollutes the day. We feel, conceive, or reason, laugh or weep, embrace fond woe, or cast our cares away. It is the same. For, be it joy or sorrow, the path of its departure still is free. Man's yesterday may ne'er be like his morrow. Naught may endure but mutability.
Mutability, change. I mean, that things change, and the only thing that you can know for certain is that it's all going to change. And right before that, that's actually the description of what's going on in the poem. Alas, why does man boast of sensibility superior to those apparent in the brute? It only renders them more necessary beings. If our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. But now we are moved by every wind that blows and a chance word or scene that word may convey to us. That things will happen, the wind will blow, and then suddenly, my impression has changed now, and what this means, there's no solace in this kind of thing. That every time you think that you're going to find something to you know, to find solace in something, something will happen in nature or the world or your life and sleep, or and it'll change, and then you have to kind of start all over again, in a sense. It's not very, you know, satisfying. It's not very, you know, consoling, is it?
Well, it's interesting because you talk about, or he talks about rather, the notion of like our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, which is, as we're about to discover, where the creature begins.
Very interesting.
You
Yeah.
know, that we start with, like all life, you start with the baseline and then build out from there. And funnily enough, it almost feels like the notion behind this book or behind their parallel stories is that all knowledge is misery. You know, ignorance is in fact bliss.
Or is it that, is that the counter, the creature makes the counter argument then later, because
Oh, of course, yeah.
you know, his life is confined to just the basic things, and he's shunned and unhappy. So the Victor will, let's do our little mid break right now, 2 minutes early. And then we're going to get into, you know, the Sea of Ice, the Mer de Glace, and the creature, wandering spirits. Yeah. So where this, you know, this was one of the great chapters in this book. But in the meantime, let me just tell everyone that we bring you Sundays with Frankenstein for free, as we did with Sundays with Dracula last year. So if you'd like to donate to the Rosenbach, you can do so at our website. But also, why not become a member? Members of the Rosenbach get free and exclusive access to some programs, like the one on Wednesday night, our Frankenfilms program. Plus, you always get 10% off of any of our reading courses, of which there are a great many of them, and 50% off of any Rosenbach programs. And did you know that the basic membership level is also called the Mary Shelley level? So what could be more perfect for you Franken readers to join the Rosenbach at the Mary Shelley level and help us bring the books and manuscripts in our collections to life? And I want to give a shout out to some new members this week, people who joined the Rosenbach just over the last week at the Mary Shelley level. Charlene from Middletown, Delaware, Russell from Philadelphia, Melissa from Perrysburg, Ohio, and Sharon from Fairfax, Virginia joined at the Mary Shelley level. But others joined at an even higher level, which is really great. At the Abigail Adams level, Derek from Lancaster, PA, and Holly from Birmingham, Alabama. And at the Phyllis Wheatley level, which is like way high up there, Laurie from Philadelphia joined. So I want to thank all of you. And if you're watching, you know, I hope you're watching. Thank you for joining. And to everyone who has joined the Rosenbach or given a donation, your support helps me so I can make this show, and helps the Rosenbach continue to create programs and to care for our collections. So thank you all very much. And now that these people are members, they can attend for free the upcoming program called Frankenfilms, Mary Shelley's novel at the movies. Join me and Dan Hodge for a conversation about the history of film adaptations of Mary Shelley's novel, from Thomas Edison's silent short film to the Universal and Hammer horror films to contemporary adaptations. Frankenstein has haunted the movies since the very creation of film. Dan and I will get to talk about some of our favorites, and then we'll also get a peek at a few items from Dan's memorabilia collection. And of course, any questions you have about Frankenfilms, you can ask them, and we will be happy to talk about them. And we have merchandise, shirts, glasses, and stickers. Let's go back to that page here. Let's see if we run out of them yet. We have run out of more things. We have run out of, I think, the cocktail glasses as well. I'm going to share this page again. You can go to buy these things. It looks like you'll have to pre-order glasses and some of the shirts now. Stickers are, I think, have not sold out. But if you pre-order them, we will get to them to you like ASAP. As soon as we can put this reorder in and get them out to you, we will. I really want to thank everybody. There was a flurry of emails today this morning that like, oh no, we've put them on sale. They're all going to sell out before the show. So that's a good thing that, you know, that they will sell out, but we will definitely have some more things for you guys if they do sell out. So please pre-order if you don't get the things that you want. So let us go back to the book, and I want to, there was a couple questions. I answered that one. Adrian asked, I noticed many typos in his version regarding French names, because Adrian is actually watching from France. Chamonix and not Chamonix with the OU in there. And Mont Blanc didn't take, there's no circumflex over the Blanc there. Yeah, it's, if you look at her manuscript, Mary Shelley's manuscript, you will find she doesn't, she often misspells things, and then they get corrected for the published edition, but perhaps some things don't. And it is a little, you know, different. Like, do you go by her spelling of, you know, a French word, or you do go by the way the French spell it? And so it's there. And I don't know if there's any, like, to call it a typo, I'm not sure if it's a typo in the sense that it was a mistake. It is the way that, you know, maybe perhaps even English people spelled something at the time, but you will find differences there in those spelling. Gina asked about the Frankenfilm session. If we can't attend live, will we get a recording? And I had someone else email me that about today, and I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure that out because I would like you guys to be able to see it. And if you can't make it and you're a member, so stay tuned. I'll make that announcement after the show. Maybe we'll know by the show, and I can make that announcement on the next episode of Sundays with Frankenstein next Sunday. I'll let you know how you could see it if you couldn't, or if you can. And it's just work with the technology we have and how we can make things accessible to people at a later date, and yet still have that incentive of asking people to join to be able to watch it. So we've got to figure out all of that stuff, and I am trying to, because I just want everybody to see everything all the time. So okay, now we're back to this chapter. It was nearly noon when I arrived. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. And this is this, you know, mer de glace, this sea of ice that happens in this valley with the river comes over, and then it all freezes in the winter, and it freezes in these kind of waves all through. There's some gorgeous pictures, but there's a picture I want to show first that's actually not of the sea of glass, but it's a picture that, as Victor is standing here on the rock overlooking, I'm often reminded of this painting by Caspar David Friedrich, The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. And this, you'll find this picture on editions of Frankenstein, on editions of other romantic works. And this is a picture I always use, a painting I would always show to students in teaching this novel, or teaching kind of like a little unit about romanticism. And like, this says a lot about, you know, at least what these romantic poets thought of themselves, and certainly in a sense what Mary Shelley is the picture she's tried to create here. But this would be where the fog is, would perhaps be it would still be white, and it would be all the ice down here and mountains in the background. But it's the solitariness, the coming to be inspired by nature, but also alone, which is the image that often wants, and it's what Victor does in the novel. And in real life, we think that this is what all these poets were doing. They were usually with other people, you know, and like Mary and Percy are doing this kind of stuff, and you know, Mary's stepsister is with them, and a baby and a nursemaid, and you know, so you know, we talk about Wordsworth going off and looking at Tintern Abbey and wandered lonely like a cloud and all this stuff. Often his sister was with him doing this stuff, and that often these excursions out into nature were done with others around them. And But this is certainly the image that they liked, and the image that readers like to think of these people. So this is the wanderer over the sea of glass, but also this is a painting from 1781 by Carl Ludwig Hackert, and it is a painting of that valley. And you could, this is, his impression of what he was seeing and what people saw, this just vast, I mean, they call it the Sea of Glass. I mean, it's just ice that all forms here and lasts for months. And I love this picture here. This is a photograph from the early 20th century, 1902, 03, 04, I forget. It says 02 to 04, and we're not sure where. This is from the Zurich Central Library collection of people going on a little expedition. And I love this picture because you can really see the ice and how these are like giant waves here that you could then go down in between. And this is what Victor is overlooking right now. This is what he is seeing right now as he's looking over these and sees the mountains behind. I'm not sure. I think Mont Blanc might be the one off to the right here. Or maybe who knows? One of these mountains will be Mont Blanc. Maybe it's even behind us. So but this is the scene without all these people in their little Edwardian costumes or Victorian costumes, trudging along with their walking sticks. That this guy is looking out over right here. So, all righty, that's the illustrated portion of the show. Mont Blanc in awful majesty, and then he says, "Wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life." That, like a prayer, right? A prayer to the wandering spirits, but he is a wandering spirit himself. And the creature who will suddenly appear as like the other wandering, spirit. There's another moment in the history. I'm sorry, Dan, I'm just showing stuff all day today.
I love it. Are you kidding? This is great.
This is another moment in this book, the history of the 6 weeks tour. This is a little later. This is a letter that was written by Percy. And we know this is written by Percy at this point. And he's talking about Mont Blanc here was before us, but it was covered with cloud. And then we get to this point. It is, it's a little higher here. I never imagined what mountains were before. I mean, think of that. Like, they went to see these mountains and they were like they couldn't believe that this was like the experience. I mean, to see these mountains. The immensity of these aerial summits excited when they suddenly burst upon the sight a sentiment of ecstatic wonder, not unallied to madness. And remember, this was all one scene. It all pressed home to our regard and our imagination. Though it embraced a vast extent of space, the snowy pyramids were shot into the bright blue sky, seemed to overhang our path, the ravine clothed with gigantic pines and black with its depth below, so deep that the very roaring of the untamable Arve which rolled through it could not be heard above. All was as much our own as if we had been the creators of such impressions in the minds of others as now occupied our own. And then this paragraph ends, nature was the poet whose harmony held our spirits more breathless than that of the divinest. I mean, this is where Percy finds the divine in the world, not in a god, certainly not in religion, but in nature itself. But it's that our spirits, that harmony held our spirits. It's fascinating that Percy can absolutely be an atheist and doesn't believe in God or organized religion, but he believes in spirits. He believes in that non-material world is out there that exists, and the spirits here, and Victor calling for the wandering spirits, and those lines are Mary, that she writes those in the text. Percy didn't add those, but she's tapping into something that he and that Percy and her and she had already shared on their first trip through this valley. So I had to share that moments where their life, and either at the summer that she's inspired by and begins writing this, or even the year before, 2 years before, when she has with their first trip through there. So, but Victor calls for the wandering spirits to come and take him away with them, that he wants to be a wandering spirit too. And suddenly he beheld the figure of a man. That's interesting, right, Dan?
Yeah, it's actually almost exactly the same thing Walton says at the beginning, doesn't he? Where he refers to it as the
Walton
figure.
says the shape of a man, although of like gigantic stature or something like that. But Walton says the shape of a man, and Victor says the figure of a man, but still not a man. Mm-hmm. Something that looks like a man, but not quite it. That they both have there's a difference here for them. And here it's also, he has superhuman speed, and he bounded over the crevices in the ice. Victor says, I felt a faintness seize me.
Hardy constitution, Victor.
Yeah. But he was quickly restored by the cold gale of the mountains. I mean, we get so many moments in this novel where he is restored. This is when, again, if we're talking back to Walton, they restore him to life because he has passed out. And it's the nature that does the restoring here, which is interesting. And then he says that it was the wretch whom I had created. He realizes who it is. And he's going to close with him in Mortal Kombat. Where's the Mortal Kombat song? We need to come on right here. I don't think you're going to close with him in Mortal Kombat, Victor. But we, of course, know how dangerous and well, we'll see what the creature says. The creature almost scoffs at that Victor will actually fight him. He says his countenance bespoke bitter anguish combined with disdain and malignity, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes. You made him, Victor. This is what he has made, but it's that he still has that revulsion. Now, in the meantime, he believes the creature has murdered William, and so that's all wrapped up in how he would feel about him. But this is still this, and it's almost as if he wanted the same experience, the same sublime experience that he gets with nature. He thought that was going to happen with his creation, but it is so overwhelmingly kind of horrifying to him that he has the opposite reaction of what he does with nature. That what's he saying in the beginning when he creates him? I created the features to be beautiful, and great God, how they're not. That he's looking for this experience very much like he looks for in nature, and doesn't get it with his own creature, and it completely repulses him, and it's still there. He says, I recovered only to overwhelm him with words expressive of furious detestation and contempt, which is hilarious, right? That's why I recovered myself to, so I can utter words of furious detestation and contempt at you. And we'll get this very heightened language as we go through this passage. Let's read it. We have plenty of time today, so I'm going to read Victor.
Before we launch in, can I express something that I love about that little passage? It's super quick, but this notion that he calls upon nature and the wandering spirits to carry him away from joy, and it's exactly what happens. Mm-hmm. you know, and it's not perhaps in the way that he thought, where it's like this thing descends upon him and then unfolds this story that drives him even further from happiness. But further still, it's this thing that I love that happens in the Romantics, and it's textbook Victor Frankenstein, where he's basically like calling on the things above to come and terminate his life so that he can leave behind the veil of tears. And this thing arrives, and he needs to recover and like fight and cling to life as hard as possible. You know, and I think that's just so wonderful, the poetic notion of what it would be to die in this moment. And when the creature shows up, he's like, to hell with all that, let's do this. I'm gonna fight him mortal arbitrament. So anyway, I want to just express that.
Is it a moment of Victor being heroic, and in a way that we do not still equate heroism, you know, clearly, but is it for that? I mean, is Victor being heroic in this situation, for especially for a reader of this time, do you think?
Perhaps. I mean, I would say that I think it's an example of Victor displaying heroics, you know, like you say,
displaying heroics rather than being heroic. I like that.
Yeah, it's like you say, the older version of the world, because now we think of heroes doing heroic kind of noble things, and no, it almost feels like bluster. Well, we'll get into it and, you know, do the whole thing
as we read it. I'm gonna make a new drink before we start.
I thought you had one on the hip.
I do, like, but I have to put the ice in and pour it in.
Oh, I see. I got excited. I was like,
Garrett, pour that in.
This is, for those of you at home, this is how actors prepare.
It's the way I always have. Definitely have a nip before any show that I ever did.
Oh my gosh. Well, Ed, at long last, you and I get to play a scene together. So here it is.
There you go. That's why I want to do this. It's my own I'm like Victor here, my own selfish reason to do this.
So cheers.
Cheers. Ah, boy, this is such a good drink. I really like it. All righty. Hamed says in our questions, it's not a question, but a comment, I don't see it as Victor being heroic so much as self-loathing in the hate of this creature. So, I think so. Hold on a second. I've got the low system resources thing here. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you.
Good. All right.
You did kind of
like
drift for a second.
Because the last time I got that message was the last time you were on, and I went out for like several seconds.
That effect on people. So, you know.
So I just want to make sure we're not going to go out as we're reading this. So good. I think
Isn't this scintillating for those of you at home?
I think we're in good shape. All right.
Great.
All right. So I'll start with Victor. Devil, I exclaimed, do you dare approach me? And do not you fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked on your miserable head? Begone, vile insect, or rather, stay, that I may trample you to dust. And oh, that I could, with the extinction of your miserable existence, restore those victims whom you have so diabolically murdered.
I expected this reception, said the demon. All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living beings? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me? How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends.
Abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation? Come on then, that I may extinguish the spark which I so negligently bestowed. My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily eluded me and said,
Be calm. I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred of my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple. But I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural Lord and King, if thou wilt also perform thy part which thou owest me. Oh, Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous.
Begone. I will not hear you. There can be no community between you and me. We are enemies. Begone, or let us try our strength in a fight to which one must fall.
How can I move thee? Will no entreaties cause thee to turn a favorable eye upon thy creature who implores thy goodness and compassion? Believe me, Frankenstein, I was benevolent. My soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone, miserably alone? You, my creator, abhor me. What hope can I gather from your fellow creatures who owe me nothing? They spurn and hate me. The desert mountains and dreary glaciers are my refuge. I have wandered here many days. The caves of ice, which I only do not fear, are a dwelling to me, and the only one which man does not grudge. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings. If the multitude of mankind knew of my existence, they would do as you do and arm themselves for my destruction. Shall I not hate them who abhor me? I will keep no terms with my enemies. I am miserable, and they shall share my wretchedness. Yet, it is in your power to recompense me and deliver them from an evil which it only remains for you to make so great that it will not only you and your family, but thousands of others be swallowed up in the whirlwinds of its rage. Let your compassion be moved and do not disdain me. Listen to my tale. When you have heard that, abandon or commiserate with me, as you shall judge that I deserve. But hear me. The guilty are allowed by human laws, bloody as they may be, to speak in their own defense before they are condemned. Listen to me, Frankenstein. You accuse me of murder, and yet you would, with a satisfied conscience, destroy your own creature. Oh, praise the eternal justice of man. Yet I ask you not to spare me. Listen to me. And then, if you can, and if you will, destroy the work of your hands.
Why do you call to my remembrance circumstances of which I shudder to reflect? That I have been the miserable origin and author? Cursed be the day, abhorred devil, in which you first saw light. Cursed, although I curse myself, be the hands that formed you. You have made me wretched beyond expression. You have left me no power to consider whether I am just to you or not. Begone, relieve me from the sight of your detested form.
Thus I relieve you, my creator, he said, and placed his hands before my eyes, which I flung from me with violence. Thus I take from thee the sight which you abhor. Still, thou canst listen to me and grant me thy compassion. By the virtues that I once possessed, I demand this from you. Hear my tale. It is long and strange, and the temperature of this place is not fitting to your fine sensations. Come to the hut upon the mountain. The sun is yet high in the heavens. Before it descends to hide itself behind yon snowy precipices and illuminate another world, you will have heard my story and can decide. On you it rests, whether I quit forever the neighborhood of man and lead a harmless life, or become the scourge of your fellow creatures and the author of your own speedy ruin.
As he said this, he led the way across the ice. I followed. We'll hit the rest at the end there, so we have something to end on. But thank you. Well read. Boy, that's
fun.
Treat for me too. That's, and well, I wanted to do this for two reasons. Number one, because I almost couldn't choose, like almost everything the creature says, especially I want, we need to talk about and is there. But there's the other thing too, where, and I think, I think Mary Shelley intends this. It's these two guys yelling at each other on a mountain. And I think there's a level of, this is the way men settle things. And it is not conducive to anybody's happiness, or it's not really going to help. Victor here, behaves, behaves like, a brat, and really doesn't, he has that thing in him that it's all my rage, and this is all I have, for you. And the creature is just so trying to lead him through this. But I wonder if it's also the creature's also leading him through in a way that is also very male-centered as well. And
absolutely. The thing really interesting to me in this, and of course, as a young reader, brought up on the universals and whatever, I could not have given less of a crap about this chapter, because you want a different kind of showdown. But this is the first time that we encounter the creature for any kind of substantive moment in the novel, and he is shockingly eloquent. Victor speaks in kind of short bursts of almost hyperbolic, tending towards absurdity, frankly, the kind of things that he threatens and the language that he uses, and the way that the creature's argument is crafted and just so succinctly, although he speaks at great length, but it's so cleanly orchestrated that the difference between these two people, these two characters, is immediately pointed up. Which of the two of them is arguably the more reasonable.
Yeah. The creature is so rhetorically sound. I mean, he is using this genuine, established rhetoric to present this argument to his creator, and his creator's not listening to him. And it's also the first words of the creature in the novel. His first words are, "I expected this reception," which is funny that would be his first words.
Yeah.
But it's the second, but said the demon, and then, "All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things?" Wow, that's your first words in the novel. That's grim, and that is where we're heading for this. But of course, why wouldn't the word wretch appear in the creature's first sentence there? Because that's what she's writing here. But also that he can speak. And for anybody coming to this from the movie tradition like you are, it's what? What is this? And suddenly, a character from a Shakespeare play has walked into, the horror story that you knew.
And the depth of language, the fact that you hear all of his influence, with the Milton and the Plutarch and all this, the thee and the thou and the super rhetorical structure of everything. It's Shakespearean. It's magnificent. And Victor seems, he registers it not at all. Here's this thing that was this inarticulate beast, by his estimation, when last they encountered each other. And now it's this deeply considered being who shows up and speaks magnificent prose. And it's he doesn't even say anything. You're just get out of my face. Let's end this with mortal,
Yeah. Every time the creature, he's come on, let's fight.
Yeah, exactly.
And the creature has this long explanation. All right, come on, let's fight.
Yeah.
Brian has a question here. Can you discuss the creature's reverence for Victor's life throughout the book, even after Victor doesn't do what the creature asks? I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but there is a reverence to the way the creature is approaching him here, isn't there?
Yeah, and if I may, I mean, again, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, we talk about Milton and Paradise Lost, and You
Oh,
know,
we'll hit that. Yeah. I mean, and we can, that's the I am thy creature and Adam and the fallen angel. That's all here too. So we can get into that if you want.
so given the way that the creature learns language, as we will discover, um, entrenched in that is the notion of creator as God. And even though God can be unjust and punishing and terrible, even in the Bible itself, um, there is a reverence that comes with it. And so even though the creature, as we meet him, despises this, the way that he learns to think is, it springs from all the same stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I've spoken at length about the notion that I think religion is, and the Christian religion in most particular, is like a way of controlling people and convincing them that if life is better after you're dead, then you're fine. You can get people to take anything. And I think there's a degree to which the creature weirdly exemplifies.
Yeah. And we'll get that, especially as he kind of brings the Miltonian concepts of this in there, but even begins his whole appeal, like right after that first thing that he says, "You, my creator, detest and spurn me," and then, "I am thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us, and do your duty towards me." That that he right away says, "You are my creator, you are my God, and so you have a duty to me." And it's that there is an acknowledgement of Victor's power over him, and yet at the same time, like, "You've made me so superhuman, you can't beat me up. So, like, but I still acknowledge that you are my creator." And that is, I think, a lot of what you were saying, that kind of ties in with that well, that sense of the creator or the God being someone you well, in this case, owe fealty to. The control thing is a real issue, and because especially as Paradise Lost is the creature's base text for this Judeo-Christian God worldview, is interesting. But well, let's look at that, because he says, "Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed." And that is the impression that the Romantics seem to love to get out of out of Paradise Lost. But it's that Satan, Lucifer, was kind of rebels against God, and then he's suffered, like, he's the rebel, but he is kind of the punishment is more severe than what he's actually done. But of course, that's not Milton's intention. Milton's intention is to really show how Satan does go against God and is completely narcissistic and only is interested in himself. But the Romantics have a real, and as everyone did, because it's the William Blake line that Milton was of Satan's party and didn't know it. I think it's Blake that said that, I can't remember. That he creates a too strong of a character there, who's too appealing in his rebelliousness. And of course, springs right out of Milton, who was also very tied to early on in his career against the crown, and was among those who led the revolution that killed Charles II and afterwards. And then he's able to, unlike some others, he's able to become okay again after the restoration of the crown in England. But he is, a rebel at heart, and it's hard for him to express himself, I think, in this poem about Lucifer and not have it be a little bit attractive. But it's also this battle between, who is the creature? Is the creature Adam? Well, of course he's Adam, because you're created, but he sees himself as treated like Satan in that poem, and it harkens back also to that, the epigraph at the beginning of the book. And if you're reading it in an 1818 edition, or back in the day, every volume you get the title page again, and you keep getting reminded of this. Did I request the maker to mold? Oh, it's out of my head. What is it?
I can find it.
Did I request thee, maker, from my clay to mold me, man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? And that's from Paradise Lost. And it is Adam, being not quite defiant, but at least imploring with God that, hey, why are you asking me of this? I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to, to be born and to live by your rules, and then to have to deal with any consequences for my action. I didn't ask for this. So it is a cry for justice. That happens. And, the creature's making the same cry.
Well, and to speak kind of towards something that we're going to hit on Wednesday as a teaser, you guys should sign up to join us. The notion of a creature as a possessor of language is something that is largely absent in the way that we think about Frankenstein's creation in popular culture. Because it all comes back to Karloff in the original. With this, and his performance is incredibly sympathetic and incredible, and to the point of being pathetic, actually. But as much humanity as the creature has, it lacks that fundamental spark of being able to engage in anything other than physical interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get into The Bride of Frankenstein, he does learn to speak, but what he is able to communicate through words is incredibly rudimentary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not until you start to explore what it means for fully developed and fully engageable humanity drops into these things. And that's, interestingly enough, although I think the Universal films are the classic and the standard, and especially the first several, it's not until you hit the Hammer films, which are essentially brain switch movies, and even the latter half of Hammer's canon, where you start to engage with something that approaches what I think the book accomplishes. And we'll talk about it on Wednesday, but
well, because I think the Hammer films wind up not being, the Hammer films are about Victor.
Yes.
And the Universal films are really about the creature.
Always.
Yeah.
Because the creature is the thing that you follow over that arc. And in Hammer films, it's the Baron. You follow Peter Cushing over his trajectory. And I think the closest you get to something like this in popular culture is a film, 1969, called Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. Watch it, those of you at home. And the creature, it's a brain switch film, and you end up with Freddie Jones, and he's this incredibly sympathetic, articulate, he was a fellow scientist. And the balance between what he accomplishes and what he does against Victor speaks to this. Of course, it's not the Milton and the biblical and all that sort of thing. And this is a complete tangent, but it's interesting to me that like most of the way that we encounter the creature is not only silent, but arms out like a monolith.
It's not so tangential in that how these movies are grappling with this issue of what the creature should be and why he's a monster have everything to do with how he can speak, and they use the abnormal brain thing in the early films, but then even Hammer starts with that, like it's a damaged brain, and that's why he's monstrous, because and I think also sometimes to avoid the issues that the creature is talking about here, that to bring those issues up in a popular film in an industry that has all kinds of issues, morality issues and culture to what they can do, they have to kind of avoid some of this. They have to avoid the very things that the creature is talking about here, that I'm actually a person, I actually have a soul, and you have to acknowledge me.
Well, that first Hammer film is very much in the Universal tradition. You've got the Curse of Frankenstein, where the creature is, nonverbal, damaged brain, whatever, that whole thing. But the distance between 1931, or even if you're chasing the Universal track, like 1948 to 57, versus 1957 to 1969, like in terms of what we expect from entertainment and moral ambiguity, it's a very, very, it's an immense shift.
well, I mean, I really want to tie it to our text here,
Yeah, please.
and talk about the movies on Wednesday. But for the text here, it's the fact that he can speak and he is so eloquent, and that's eradicated for most of the movies up until very recently, up until the 1970s, or at least. And that's not recent, but for me it is. Yeah, but
Well, but the scope of Frankenstein on film, yeah, relatively recent.
until the creature gets to speak, and that makes him just monstrous and other. But in this book, he not only speaks, he speaks better than Victor does.
Yes, with much more facility, capacity, and depth of depth of intention, depth of thought, depth of philosophy. It's a marvelous. I mean, when you read the way the creature speaks in this book, it almost makes all of the other characters pale in comparison.
Hamid has a question here. He says, did Mary Shelley intentionally emphasize the creature's eloquence so that it contrasted from his monstrous appearance as a means of heightening the terror and danger he posed, or to imbue the creature with humanity despite his appearance? I like that difference there, that like, or what can happen with people. Like if you see like his speech lets us know that he can think, in an elevated way, so he's more human, or the fact that somebody that monstrous is actually speaking so well, is even more horrifying, and that's because that's the way Victor describes him. Victor describes him as it's not that he's so ugly, it's that he's dead and yet alive, and that is horrifying to see. But then to have speech come out of it, like seeing a Walking Dead zombie suddenly start talking like this, I mean, we would laugh, that would be hilarious for us, but if you really saw it, I'm not so sure it would be funny, and that would actually make it more horrifying. And I don't know if we can know her intentions of doing this, but we can certainly figure out how we react to it. And that does make it a little scarier, right? That does put it on the little more horrific side, that I think, rather than elevating the creature, maybe it does make him more scary.
I mean, I think it does both. I think it elevates him as a character, certainly, and puts us in the position of sympathizing with him. But it does make him much scarier because he's a much more formidable adversary. If all you had was Hulk smash, that doesn't gain you very much. But the fact that you have someone who can destroy you in any number of different ways and has a very good, like, sound philosophical and theological argument for doing it, that's terrifying.
He says, I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. Now, when they go back and the creature tells them his whole story, we see, like, get the exact particulars of that. But that's part of the endeavor of this novel, is about how, he is benevolent. He is not, the creature says, he is not born with original sin, in a sense. That that he is benevolent and good, and then misery makes him a fiend. Because this is the whole battle that that goes on with religion, with the Christian religion, is that, and for so many centuries, that you were born with original sin, so you're already bad. And then this starts to change, sound like 16th, 17th century, more Enlightenment era thinking about, who we are as beings, the kind of John Locke blank slate that Mary Shelley is reading at the time, that it would actually, when you're born, you're not good or bad. You are, you kind of, you take things in and then you become good or bad as your life. But what then develops from that is the idea, like, who's imagining babies as either like they're good. Like, it's not even that they're neither, they're just good, and then we can change them. And that seems to be where we're at here. And the whole idea of childhood has been, changing for a century now, will continue to change into the Victorian age, where people finally recognize that children are innocent and pure. There's nothing bad about them when they're born. They are innocent and pure and good, and then we change them later. So,
I mean, it's been a long time since your kids were young, I'm sure, because you have the glow of forgetting what tyrants babies can be.
Interesting. Yes, but no, it's funny. The I would prefer, the thing I miss most is the baby stage. So,
Sure.
like that's what I want more than anything. Um, uh, but but they, it's well. There's also another line here that I found it in the annotation for the really good annotated edition by Wolfson and Leveo that Harvard put out. And they had an annotation somewhere in this passage here about with a quote from Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which and it's in the part about parents, and the quote was, a great proportion of the misery that wanders in hideous forms around the world is allowed to rise from the negligence of parents.
Hmm.
And I love that wandering is in there too. A great proportion of the misery that wanders in hideous forms around the world is allowed to rise from the negligence of parents. That she's writing in her book at the time that if it is the way we're parenting, it is the education systems that we have here are creating or are causing people to be hideous or to do bad things. That's her whole desire to reform parental practices and education, that Wollstonecraft has in her Vindication, that really come to have a noticeable influence on this novel as we start to hear the creature's education and how he's educated and how he learns himself in the world. But that everything that Mary has imbibed from her mother's works, and from hearing her father talk about her and other people talk about it, that's all in this as well. So the Adam Satan thing too is also an interesting thing, because the creature says, I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel. If he's Adam, he's redeemable.
Hmm.
But if he is Satan, then he is not, because he's read his Paradise Lost. He can think all he wants that, that Satan was, or maybe he's just saying that himself, that that he's driven from joy for no misdeed. It's a little unclear that means, does he mean the fallen angel there, or is he talking about Adam in that second part of that sentence and himself? But regardless, Satan is not going to be redeemed. You've read Paradise Lost. There's no redemption for Satan. It doesn't happen in that, in that story. So that puts a lot of weight to that. I mean, that you can either be happy or you can never. You have the chance of happiness, or you can never, ever, ever be happy, according to the worldview, the ideas, the story that he has read. Looking at questions here. Emma says, since we're discussing children, one reason people seem to dislike Victor is because they view him as the creature's father who's refusing to take responsibility for his child. However, I doubt that if a company created a sentient AI today, people would view the team who worked on it as parents. Well, this is certainly something that happens in a lot of films now. I mean, this is Blade Runner, right? This is Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. I mean, what you create, and then it comes back to visit you, and great film by Alex Garland, Ex Machina, which is a Frankenstein story, and dealing with creating AI, and at what point does AI, something that we create, become what we would acknowledge as a sentient human. And that is what's happening in this novel as well. When I would teach this in college, to mostly young college students, so they were all like, most of them were 18. We would go through all this stuff with Victor, and they would feel for him, and then I would point out that, well, he's murdered people, and like, oh, okay, and that's not good, but they would still acknowledge his sympathy. And as you can acknowledge here, that like this is a plea for us to be on his side that he's making to Victor, and I think the reader hears it as well. But then I would ask at the end, is the creature a human being? And overwhelmingly, they would say no. And it would shock me. It shocked me the first time, and I thought that's an aberration. And every time I asked them, he never came up to the fact that he was actually human. Like they would acknowledge, like, I feel sorry for him and he should have this, that, or the other thing. But there was still a difference there that these people, that these students couldn't get through. And I started to wonder, like, is it how I'm teaching it? Like, am I teaching you that this creature is other and you should always treat him that way? Or is that something that comes from the text? And I did notice that were people that were older, that it's far more likely that they say, yes, he's human. So I think it was an age thing. I think it was people who were just coming to grips with the fact that what makes us human, and especially as they're going to college and being faced with all these texts that talk about this kind of thing, that they still weren't ready to make the jump that he's actually human. But we'll wind up now from when we've met the creature, through his whole story, and through this question that Emma had, or a question comment that Emma had about, about AI, is that what makes us human? And that's one of the reasons why this book is still relevant to us. So we're still trying to figure out that question. Well, because the creature says, right? Believe me, Frankenstein, I was benevolent. My soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone, miserably alone? You can go on and keep reading that, but you got he just said my soul. Wait a minute. How do you have a soul? Knowing that, you exist in this Judeo-Christian worldview, and this is what many of the early readers, most of the early readers reading this novel were about, would say, no, he does not have a soul. He couldn't have a soul. And this novel is just very casually throws that out there, or at least the creature believes he has a soul. And is that the same question? Are you a human being? And do you have a soul? Is that the same question? Like, just in different terms? I'm really going off.
I love it. I love it. I mean, one of the early film adaptations from the 1920s is a film called Life Without a Soul. No longer exists. It's one of the lost films, but I think that states very plainly where they land on it. And, you mentioned it might be a generational gap, because if you were to ask me, is the creature human? I don't know. Like, I would really have to meditate on that. It's a really complicated question for a number of reasons. And part of me says, well, yeah, of course. And then part of me says, absolutely not. And then there's an old joke about somebody saying, well, what happens to Frankenstein's creature at the end of the book? And the way it goes is somebody came up to a playwright after a play and they said, yeah, but what happens to the characters after the play? Playwright says, what do you mean? He says, well, what becomes of them? That playwright says, well, nothing, they're not real. And I feel that same thing sometimes, where it's like, you could really ponder about the humanity of the Frankenstein's creation, but these words on the page, when it comes down to it, it's what it incites in you that I think really where these things come to life.
Brian has a question here that is there any connection between Victor refusing to be a father and Byron's unwillingness to be a father to Allegra, which was the child that he had with Claire. I think it's actually more likely that Mary'd be writing about Percy than Byron in this situation, and the responsibilities that Percy needed to take in his life, not just with his own children, but also with Mary. But just the bigger project, the whole bigger thing of the way romantic artists create and the way they live their lives, as if then they can do something and then walk away from it. And they can't. They have to take responsibility for what they create. And I think that's really there. So in this book, Jody mentions about animals having souls, and yeah, but it's something that we still have to, that people still work out and argue about, and what does it mean? And that question about AI earlier, that's kind of almost where I'm not there yet. Like I don't like if like some art, like if it's not flesh and blood, like I don't quite go to it is actually human, but that's going to happen one day. I don't know how many centuries it will be that it'll happen, or if it's even closer than that, but it's the question of artificial intelligence becoming actual human. It's stuff that we see in the movies all the time. And one day humans will have to deal with it. When Victor's dealing with it right now, the creature is, listen to my tale, and he's gonna make his case.
And that's exactly like something that I thought about as I was reading this. One of the things that I adore about this section is Victor becomes Walton and the creature becomes Victor. They meet on the ice and the creature says, listen to my story. Like it's that nesting doll thing we talked about on the first day, where it's the way that Mary Shelley just equates them so perfectly in this moment. Not just that the creature has a story that he needs to share and is going to share it with this other person, this fellow transgressor upon what's the word I'm looking for? A territory that's not uninhabitable territory, shall we say? But they meet on the ice, which, it's like she goes out of her way to find the one place that Victor could go within walking distance of the places that he exists.
Yeah,
where he could wind up on an Arctic tundra.
Yeah, yeah. That's where they are. I led the way across the ice and I followed. They're in this place that's, and it's also that kind of liminal space kind of idea too, that they're in between. And Victor obviously can't live there. The creature can. What he's created can, because he's a new race of beings, but Victor can't. Awesome. Do you have anything else you want to hit before we hit the end here?
No, that's got me.
I had hitherto supposed him to be the murderer of my brother, and I eagerly sought a confirmation or denial of this opinion. For the first time also, I felt what the duties of a creator towards his creature were, and that I ought to render him happy before I complained of his wickedness. We get a little bit of movement there, right? A little bit of Victor might be considering that, he owes this creature something. That is, that's interesting that right there, that happens, that he is, acknowledging that he might have some duties to his creature. So, well, we'll see what happens to that, of course. So, and then they sit by the fire, and my odious companion will begin his tale. So, there was one little moment that we didn't touch on there, is when Victor's like, oh, I can't, what does he say? I can't watch you. I can't hear the story from you. And the creature puts his hands over his eyes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And he can't relieve me from the sight of your detested form.
And he just puts his hands over his face, and he's just like, all right, then just listen to me. And which is funny in a sense. But it's also, but it really harkens back to the blind man too, right? That we'll look forward to the blind man and what we get here, that when the creature encounters a blind person, that blind man can accept him. That it is, for the creature's experience up to this point, we'll learn why, it is just the sight that is, causing people to spurn him, to detest him. And he's and so it's not surprising that that's the way he's trying to explain it to Victor. Just don't look at me and you'll be fine. So that's a fascinating little piece there that we have. Looking forward to what will happen, what we'll learn about the creature in his story. So, well, we did like almost right on time today. So I'm glad we got to, get all those words out there. And I hope that was at least enjoyable for people. If not enlightening, that we did that whole passage. Franken readers, thank you all for tuning in today. We will post this recording on our website. And if that's how you're watching, thanks for watching. We have a Sundays with Frankenstein Facebook group where we can continue the conversation. You look us up on Facebook and join in that conversation. I'm always available to answer questions via email as well. Next week's co-host will be Dr. Anastasia Klimchinskaya coming back, who I absolutely love, and I'm very happy she will be back here with us. The first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is just one of the many gems of the Rosenbach's collections. If you're looking for more virtual engagement, head on over to the Rosenbach website. Check out the other virtual offerings we have, including our gallery gateways and exhibitions. And the Rosenbach is also open. You can go online and get a time ticket for your visit, so you can just come in one party at a time is allowed in, and you can stay nice and safe. And we have our new exhibition on the 19th century Japanese sailor Manjiro. So visit us. You can support by donation. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join the basic membership level. The Rosenbach is the Mary Shelley level. And you can also support this show by buying Sundays with Frankenstein t-shirts, glasses, and stickers. So Dan, thank you for being here today.
Ed, always a pleasure.
There's a t-shirt in the mail for you, right? So something like that, or a glass. So is a t-shirt or a glass? It's something that's already on the way to you. So the next time you're on, you can have that for the show. So
you'll see it.
I will see you on Wednesday night. Join us next week on Sundays with Frankenstein for chapters 3 and 4 of volume 2, when the creature begins to tell his creator what the hell he's been up to for the last 2 years. Once again, will be played out by Tucker Christine's Pleated Gazelle song, It's Alive. Farewell, wandering spirits. Remember, you have hope and the world before you. Thanks for watching today, everybody.
I have some candy for